What happens when a prince, a man born under the crushing weight of centuries-old tradition, suddenly snaps? Not at the press, not at the paparazzi, but at the woman who promised to be his refuge. Leave me alone. Those three words rang out louder than the applause that filled the charity concert hall, echoing not just in the room, but in headlines, whispers, and the minds of millions who had once believed in the fairy tale. You might think it was just a husband and wife quarrel, the kind every couple has. But ask yourself this: what happens when that quarrel unfolds in front of an audience, cameras, and a sea of onlookers ready to immortalize every flicker of tension? Suddenly, it's not just personal. It's political. It's cultural. It's history repeating itself in ways no one expected. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The night was supposed to be magical. A glittering charity concert, one of those carefully orchestrated events meant to remind the world that Harry and Meghan could use their star power for good. The lights, the music, the crowd, all of it built toward a moment where Harry, the once wild prince now rebranded as the compassionate Duke, would take center stage. This was his moment to shine, to speak from the heart about causes that defined him outside the palace walls. But then came the interruption. Meghan's hand, reaching, clinging, pulling. Her body angled into the spotlight, just as Harry prepared to take his place. The crowd might have seen it as nothing more than a loving gesture, but insiders knew better. They saw the tightness in Harry's jaw, the flash of irritation in his eyes, and then, those words, sharp and unfiltered, "Leave me alone." Imagine the silence that followed. A hall filled with applause moments earlier now struck by the cold reality of human drama. The audience didn't know whether to clap, gasp, or pretend nothing had happened. Cameras caught flashes of confusion. Charity organizers exchanged glances. Some whispered, "Was this a crack in the Sussex facade?" But why does this matter now? Because this wasn't an isolated moment. It was the culmination of months, some say years, of tension building between a man desperate for independence and a woman unwilling to loosen her grip. This wasn't just about a concert. This was about control, about image, about the messy truth behind a marriage the world had been told was unshakable. Think about it. Harry had once defined himself as the soldier prince, the rebel who broke free from the suffocating traditions of Buckingham Palace. He had always been the independent spirit, carving his own path whether through military service or daring adventures. And yet, on that night, he wasn't seen as independent. He was seen as overshadowed, interrupted, and frustrated by the very person who claimed to love him most. And here's the irony. Meghan herself had long framed her story as one of independence, a woman who forged her own career, stood on her own, and demanded her own spotlight. But when her hand clutched Harry in that moment, what the world saw wasn't independence, it was dependency. Needy, clingy, unable to let him have the stage to himself. Why do people care so deeply about this? Because when royals falter in public, it isn't just gossip. It's a reflection of the institution itself, a mirror that reveals fragility where strength was supposed to be. The monarchy has always thrived on image: Diana's grace, the Queen's stoicism, William and Kate's unity. And now here were Harry and Meghan, showing the opposite. Tension, division, a lack of harmony. Do you see the pattern? Diana once spoke of there being 3 people in her marriage. Meghan's critics now whisper that there are 2 in Harry's marriage, but only one voice being heard. Is it Meghan's voice or Harry's silence? But let's not pretend Harry is innocent in all of this. His outburst was raw, unfiltered, almost reckless. Royals are trained from birth to keep composure, to smile even when crumbling inside. For Harry to snap in public, to say the words out loud, meant his patience had been worn down to threads. He could have swallowed his anger. He could have pasted on a smile, but he didn't. He let it rip. And that's what makes this moment explosive. Because when a prince loses his composure, it's not just a crack in his marriage. It's a revelation of everything he's been suppressing. The anger, the resentment, the exhaustion. Now picture Meghan's reaction. Stunned, maybe embarrassed, maybe even furious herself. How dare he humiliate her in public? She's the one who has stood beside him through media wars, royal rejection, and the pursuit of a new identity. In her eyes, perhaps, she wasn't stealing his moment. She was standing with him, showing unity. But in Harry's eyes, Her presence became suffocation. And that's the tragedy, isn't it? Two people, convinced they're fighting for each other, when in reality they're fighting against each other. Let me ask you, have you ever been in a situation where the person who's supposed to lift you up ends up dragging you down, even unintentionally? That's what this looked like. Harry, desperate for space. Meghan, desperate for presence. Two opposing forces colliding on stage, in front of the entire world. And here's the kicker. Insiders whisper this wasn't the first time. Behind closed doors, staffers had noticed Harry pulling away, trying to reclaim independence while Meghan clung harder. At receptions, at galas, at casual photo ops, the same body language repeated. His shoulders turned slightly away, her hand reaching to redirect him. The imbalance was subtle, but once you noticed it, you couldn't unsee it. This is why the charity concert moment matters so much. It was the mask slipping, the private battle spilling into public view. Harry, stripped of patience. Meghan, stripped of control. And the world, watching. But what came next, what Harry allegedly said backstage, away from the cameras, would change everything. And no one saw it coming. The lights dimmed. The stage shimmered with a golden glow. Musicians tuned their instruments. The crowd hushed in anticipation. And there he was, Prince Harry, standing just behind the curtain, moments away from stepping forward. This was supposed to be his time. His message. His cause. A charity concert wasn't about glamour. It was about giving back, showing leadership, and reminding the world that his life had purpose beyond the walls of Buckingham Palace. But before Harry could move, before the spotlight could fully embrace him, Meghan's hand appeared, clutching his arm, tugging, inserting herself into the scene. To the untrained eye, it looked affectionate. To those who knew the couple, it was something else entirely. This wasn't tenderness. It was control. Leave me alone. The words sliced through the air, sharper than the strings of the orchestra behind them. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Cameras flashed, freezing Harry's expression, clenched jaw, narrowed eyes, raw anger bursting through a mask that had been carefully polished for years. Meghan's face, caught in the light, was a mixture of shock and disbelief. Imagine being in that room. Dozens of dignitaries, charity leaders, celebrities, and ordinary supporters sat frozen, unsure if they'd just witnessed a marital spat, a performance gone wrong, or the unraveling of the Sussex brand in real time. The applause faltered. Whispers rose, and Harry, flushed, visibly shaken, turned away from Meghan and strode to the microphone. Now, here's the uncomfortable truth. Harry's outburst didn't come out of nowhere. It was months in the making. The public saw the explosion, but insiders knew the sparks had been flickering long before. Think about the way their story has been sold. A united front. A love that conquered palace politics, racism, rejection. They were the couple who broke free, hand in hand, ready to carve their own empire. Yet the cracks were always there, weren't they? The body language experts dissecting every photograph. The rumors of fights behind closed doors. The complaints from staff who claimed Meghan's demands and Harry's temper made working for them unbearable. That night at the charity concert, all of it boiled over. Harry's words weren't just directed at Meghan. They were directed at the entire situation. The suffocation he felt being constantly managed, constantly overshadowed, constantly defined not as Harry, the prince with his own voice, but as Harry, Meghan's husband. Let's pause here for a moment. Can you see the irony? Harry left the royal family to escape control, to carve his own path, and yet, on that stage, he looked more trapped than ever. The audience could feel it. One guest, later quoted anonymously, said, "You could cut the tension with a knife." Harry looked like a man who'd been pushed too far. Meghan looked like she couldn't believe he'd dared to say it in public. And that's the thing about public outbursts. They reveal truths carefully hidden. Royals are supposed to be trained, rehearsed, calm under pressure. For Harry to break protocol so dramatically, to snap at Meghan with the world watching, meant something deeper was at play. Do you remember Diana's interviews, when she confessed the pain of her marriage? Or Charles's visible discomfort when confronted about Camilla? These moments stick, not because they're scandals, but because they're human. The charity concert joined that infamous list of royal cracks exposed under the bright lights of public duty. Now picture this. Meghan's hand still lingering awkwardly at her side, her smile frozen, her eyes darting to the crowd. Harry ignoring her completely, gripping the microphone as if it were his lifeline. The audience tried to recover, clapping politely, willing the moment to move on. But no one could unhear the words. "Leave me alone." 3 syllables, heavy with meaning. Was it a cry for freedom? A desperate attempt to reclaim space? Or simply the frustration of a man who felt smothered one too many times? And then there's Meghan. To her, perhaps it was nothing more than support, standing by his side, holding him steady in the spotlight. But to Harry, it was suffocation. This clash of perception, support versus control, is the very heart of their marriage troubles. Meghan thrives in visibility. Harry longs for independence. She leans in, he pulls back. She grabs, he recoils. And on that stage, the push and pull reached its breaking point. Audience members described the atmosphere as awkward, tense, uncomfortable. Some said they wanted to look away, but couldn't. Others admitted they felt sympathy for Harry, as though they were watching a man cry out silently through anger. But here's the twist. This wasn't the climax. This was the opening scene of a much bigger unraveling. Because what Harry did on stage was just the beginning. The real fireworks happened backstage, when the cameras turned away and the audience filed out. That's where the whispers began. That's where staffers overheard words that would later leak to the press. That's where Meghan's mask reportedly slipped, and Harry's fury found its full voice. And what happened behind those curtains? What was said in the heated exchange away from the spotlight? The answer would stun even those who thought they'd seen it all. How much pressure can one man take before he explodes? That's the real question at the heart of this saga. Because Harry's sharp outburst at Meghan during the charity concert didn't just happen in isolation. It was the inevitable eruption of months, even years, of pent-up frustrations. The build-up was slow, insidious, and relentless, and those who were watching closely saw it coming long before that night. Let's rewind. When Harry first stepped away from the royal family with Meghan, the narrative was painted in bold, romantic strokes. He was the protective husband, shielding his wife from a hostile institution and toxic press. He was the man who sacrificed his birthright for love. It played like a Hollywood script, the rebellious prince and his outsider bride, carving their destiny together. The world swooned. But reality, as it so often does, told a different story. Harry had always been defined by freedom. As a soldier, he found his identity in Afghanistan, away from the gilded cage. He thrived in the camaraderie of men who didn't treat him as a prince, but as a brother in arms. He found peace in anonymity, even joy in danger. Compare that to his new life, where every step, every smile, every glance was scrutinized and often directed. He was no longer the soldier or the rebel prince. He was Meghan's plus one, the silent figure standing just off her shoulder. Doesn't that sting when you think about it? The man who once charged across battlefields reduced to the role of background character at red carpets. And it wasn't just the public who noticed. Insiders whispered about how Meghan often grabbed his hand first, guided his movements, even cut him off mid-sentence. Tiny gestures, perhaps, but when repeated, they became chains. And Harry felt it. In private, according to those who were there, his temper simmered. He wanted moments to himself, time to breathe, to express his own thoughts without being interrupted or redirected. But Meghan, fearing irrelevance, refused to loosen her grip. To her, visibility was survival. To him, it was suffocation. Here's the contradiction that makes this so tragic. Meghan's clinginess was born from insecurity. She wanted to be seen, to be validated, to prove she belonged. But her very actions only deepened Harry's resentment. The more she clung, the more he pulled away. The more he pulled away, the tighter she held on. It was a vicious cycle spiraling toward that charity concert eruption. Think about it. Have you ever been smothered by someone who swears they're helping you? Maybe it was a friend who wouldn't let you breathe, a partner who confused support with control. That's where Harry found himself, caught between love and resentment, duty and independence. The signs were everywhere. At photo ops, Harry often looked stiff, forced smiles plastered on his face. During interviews, Meghan dominated answers, while Harry muttered a few words before going silent. And behind the scenes, staff noticed the tension. One aide reportedly described the atmosphere as walking on eggshells, never knowing when Harry's temper would flare or when Meghan would push too far. It all built up like steam in a kettle. And just like a kettle, when the pressure grew too intense, it was bound to whistle. Let's not forget, Harry is Diana's son. He inherited her fire, her impulsiveness, her refusal to play the quiet royal when pushed beyond his limit. Diana, too, exploded when she was silenced. So is it really surprising that Harry, cornered by what he saw as Meghan's constant neediness, finally snapped in the most public way possible? And here's where the irony bites again. Meghan thought she was showing unity. By grabbing Harry at the concert, she believed she was reinforcing their image as an inseparable couple. But Harry saw it differently. He saw his moment, his independence, being stolen right out from under him. To him, it wasn't love, it was theft. The frustration had been simmering for months, but on that night, it boiled over. His voice cracked not just with anger, but with exhaustion. Those 3 words, "Leave me alone," were a confession, a desperate plea, a sign that he could no longer bear the weight of constant closeness. And Meghan? She didn't understand. Not fully. How could she, when in her mind she was fighting to stay relevant, to be included, to be loved by an audience that often turned against her? 2 different perspectives, 2 conflicting needs. One stage, one explosion. But here's the twist no one expected. Harry's frustrations didn't stop at words. According to whispers from staff, what he said backstage that night went far beyond "leave me alone." He revealed exactly how long this resentment had been brewing and what he was prepared to do if things didn't change. And those words, leaked later, would shake even his most loyal supporters. Every relationship tells a story, but some stories are written not in words, but in gestures. Watch closely, because in the world of Harry and Meghan, it's the subtle body language, the quiet touches, the constant pulling and guiding that reveal more than any polished interview ever could. At public events, Meghan's presence was always unmistakable. She didn't just walk beside Harry, she directed him. The hand clasped tightly around his arm, the way she would lean in to answer for him, the moments where she would step half a pace ahead. It was a choreography repeated again and again, until the pattern became impossible to ignore. Now ask yourself, was this affection, or was it control? Let's break it down. Take one of their most famous appearances, a red carpet in London where cameras flashed relentlessly. Meghan reached for Harry's hand, tugging him forward, even as he hesitated. His smile was faint, almost forced, while hers was radiant, dominating. Body language experts noted it instantly, Meghan leading, Harry following. One even described it as a reversal of roles, Harry behaving as the accessory, Meghan the star. The charity concert incident was simply the most dramatic version of a habit Harry had grown used to, being grabbed, guided, positioned. Meghan's supporters argued that it was love, that she was a protective partner who wanted to stay close. But critics saw it differently. They saw a man stripped of autonomy, suffocated by constant proximity. And here's where the irony deepens. Meghan has long branded herself as independent, a strong woman who didn't need a man to define her. Yet her behavior in public often betrayed insecurity, a constant need to be attached, visible, and in control. Was it really independence, or was it the opposite, dependence on being seen as half of the Sussex brand? Consider how different William and Kate look in public. Their body language radiates balance. Kate walks beside William, sometimes behind, sometimes ahead, but always in sync. Their hands find each other naturally, not forcefully. There's no tugging, no grabbing, no constant reminders of presence. Theirs is a partnership of equals. Harry and Meghan? They looked less like equals and more like a tug of war. Humor creeps into this story, too. Social media exploded with memes portraying Harry as a man on a leash. Twitter jokes compared Meghan to a puppeteer pulling invisible strings, Harry the reluctant marionette. And while the internet laughs, the undertone is serious. Perception matters. When the public sees a prince reduced to a background figure, sympathy shifts toward him, and scrutiny sharpens on her. But the truth is more complicated than memes. Meghan's grabby behavior didn't come from malice. It came from fear. Fear of being left behind in a world that devours women the moment they step out of the spotlight. Fear of irrelevance, especially after leaving the royal family where titles and appearances once guaranteed attention. To Meghan, every camera flash mattered. Every gesture was an opportunity to cement the brand. And Harry, willing or not, was part of that brand. The problem? Harry didn't see himself as a brand. He saw himself as a man, desperate to reclaim individuality, to step into spaces where his mother's legacy could be honored without the shadow of Hollywood ambition. Meghan's constant presence, her hands always pulling, told him one thing: he could never stand alone. Let me ask you directly, how would you feel if every move you made in public was preempted by someone else's grip? Would you feel supported, or would you feel trapped? That's the heart of this issue. And it wasn't just about optics. Insiders whispered about private quarrels sparked by these very public gestures. Harry would ask for space. Meghan would argue that closeness was strength. Staff members recalled moments where Harry shrugged off her hand, only to be met with Meghan's steely glare. The message was clear: appearances mattered more than his comfort. And so, when Meghan grabbed him at the charity concert, Harry wasn't reacting to a single moment. He was reacting to years of being directed, positioned, controlled. His "leave me alone" was more than anger, it was rebellion. But rebellion against what, exactly? Against Meghan's clinginess? Against the public perception of him as weak? Or against the deeper fear that he had simply traded one kind of control, the firm, for another? Whatever the answer, one thing is undeniable: Meghan's grip became the symbol of their imbalance. A touch meant to reassure instead became the trigger for an explosion. And the concert wasn't the end of it. What happened backstage, when Meghan's attempts at control collided with Harry's fury, would be described later by insiders as one of the most volatile moments in their marriage. Because if Meghan thought she could smooth it over with another touch, another grab, she was about to discover that Harry was no longer willing to be steered. And what he said behind those curtains would send shockwaves far beyond the concert hall. Behind every glittering royal or celebrity appearance lies a shadow world. Smiles are rehearsed, speeches are drafted, photo angles are calculated. But what happens in the green rooms, in the curtained hallways, in the corridors where only staff and insiders tread? That's where the truth lives. And in the case of Harry and Meghan's charity appearances, insiders say the tension was thick enough to choke on. Let's start with the staff. They weren't fooled by the perfect photographs. They saw the whispers, the cold silences, the hurried arguments just seconds before the couple stepped into the public eye. It was like flicking a switch, one aide reportedly said. 1 minute, they're snapping at each other. The next minute, they're smiling for the cameras like nothing happened. At one charity gala, Meghan insisted on reviewing the seating arrangements herself, even though staff had already planned everything. Witnesses recalled her moving place cards, positioning herself beside high-profile donors, and keeping Harry at her side. Harry, frustrated, reportedly muttered under his breath, "Does it really matter?" To Meghan, it did. To Harry, it was exhausting. And that's the theme: exhaustion. Staff noted that Harry often seemed drained after public outings, his energy sagging once the cameras were gone. Meghan, by contrast, seemed to thrive on it, often pushing to mingle longer, to stay visible, to seize every possible moment of attention. For Harry, these behind-the-scenes clashes were like slow-drip torture. For Meghan, they were strategy. Think about it this way. If the stage is where the Sussexes projected unity, the backstage was where cracks formed. Harry wanted authenticity, genuine connection with causes he cared about. Meghan wanted control, careful management of optics, ensuring her image remained untouchable. Neither goal was inherently wrong, but together, they collided. And let's not ignore the whispers from charity organizers themselves. Some confided, carefully and anonymously, that working with the couple felt like managing two separate agendas. Harry was passionate, yes, but often overshadowed by Meghan's insistence on framing events around their joint narrative. One organizer recalled how Meghan interrupted Harry mid-conversation with a patron, steering the discussion back toward her initiatives. The patron smiled politely, but Harry's face, the insider said, tightened like a rope pulled too hard. This is the part the public never sees. Meghan's hand on Harry's back, guiding him toward the next group of donors. Harry pausing, resisting, then relenting because causing a scene wasn't an option. To Meghan, she was being efficient. To Harry, he was being handled. And that word, handled, haunted him. Wasn't this why he left the royal family in the first place? To avoid being handled, managed, directed by courtiers? Yet here he was, still living under someone else's grip. Different palace, different rules, same chains, Do you see the contradiction? Meghan fought hard to prove she wasn't controlled by the firm, yet in her determination to take control of her new life, she ended up controlling Harry. The charity concert was simply the boiling point. Insiders say in the lead-up, Harry had already snapped at small things. "Give me space," he told her once when she adjusted his jacket before stepping on stage. "I can do it myself." Another time, he reportedly pulled his hand away when she grabbed it too tightly in front of photographers. Each moment small on its own, but together, they built a wall of frustration brick by brick. By the time the concert night arrived, Harry's patience was already worn thin. He wanted the stage, the spotlight, not as a celebrity, but as a man speaking from his heart about causes he believed in. Meghan, unwilling to let go, inserted herself into the moment, and the dam broke. Now let's ask the uncomfortable question. Were staff complicit in covering this up? Of course. That's their job. They kept the whispers quiet, the incidents buried, the cracks hidden. But you can't keep hiding forever. The concert moment wasn't an accident. It was inevitability. The pressure cooker had finally blown its lid. And what about the guests at these charity events? They weren't blind. One prominent figure, who attended more than one gala, said, "You could tell Harry was frustrated. His smiles never reached his eyes. Meghan was always right there, almost glued to him. It didn't feel like affection. It felt like she was proving a point. That's the tragedy, isn't it? Meghan thought she was reinforcing their image. Harry thought she was suffocating his. Both believed they were right. Both were digging the hole deeper. And so, the stage was set. Backstage tensions. Staff walking on eggshells. Charity organizers exchanging nervous glances. A husband and wife caught in a power struggle disguised as love. The concert explosion wasn't shocking to those behind the curtain. It was expected. Some even said they felt relieved, in a strange way. Relieved because at least the world could finally see what they'd been seeing all along. Harry and Meghan weren't the picture-perfect couple they pretended to be. But if the concert revealed the cracks, the aftermath revealed the collapse. Because what Harry said backstage, away from the audience but within earshot of staff, was far more explosive than "leave me alone." And those words would leave everyone wondering whether this marriage could survive the weight of two clashing egos. Independence. It's the word Harry has chased his entire life, the golden prize dangling just out of reach. Born into an institution that defined him before he could even walk, Harry's every breath, every mistake, every triumph was tied to the monarchy. And yet, deep down, he has always longed for something different, something his brother William could never have. Something his grandmother the Queen could never give: freedom. But here's the cruel twist. The more Harry tried to claim independence, the more he found himself caught in new forms of control. First it was the palace, then it was the press. And now, many argue, it is Meghan. Let's go back to the beginning. When Harry was in the military, he wasn't Prince Harry. He was simply Captain Wales. His comrades didn't bow to him. They didn't obsess over his every move. They treated him like one of them. For the first time, Harry was free from the suffocating weight of being royal. He could drink with the lads, joke around, even put his life on the line without being shielded by titles. That taste of freedom? It changed him. It made him realize he could be something beyond the crown. Fast forward to life with Meghan. At first, it looked like she was the key to unlocking the life he wanted. She was the outsider who gave him courage to break free from the firm. She encouraged him to step away, to carve his own destiny. Together, they left. Together, they branded themselves as independent royals. But independence, it turned out, was an illusion. Because what Harry craved was space. And what Meghan craved was spotlight. Do you see the contradiction? Harry wanted to walk alone sometimes, to speak for himself, to reconnect with the authenticity he felt in the army, at Invictus Games, in quiet moments honoring his mother's legacy. Meghan, on the other hand, feared invisibility. She wanted to be at his side in every photo, every appearance, every speech. To her, their power was in their togetherness. To him, it was in finally being recognized as an individual. And so the battle lines were drawn. Insiders noticed Harry's body language shift. At events, he often angled his body slightly away from Meghan, a subconscious attempt to claim space. He looked down when she spoke over him, his eyes darkening as if to say, "This was supposed to be my voice, not just ours." One staffer confided, "He used to be so proud to introduce Meghan, but lately, It felt like he just wanted to step back and breathe. Harry's quest for independence wasn't just about speeches or stage moments. It was about identity. Who was he outside the firm? Who was he outside Meghan? Could he exist as Harry, the man, the father, the advocate, without always being Harry, the husband of Meghan Markle? And here's where it gets heartbreaking. Harry's mother, Diana, spent her life fighting to be heard in a world that tried to silence her. She carved her own space, defined her own causes, became more than just Charles's wife. Harry inherited that same fire. But while Diana broke free by standing alone, Harry found himself chained in a different way, chained by a love that refused to give him breathing room. Do you feel the weight of that contradiction? Think about this. Harry had the world at his feet, and yet he still felt invisible. He had millions watching him, but he couldn't get a moment without someone pulling his arm, holding his hand, or steering his direction. It wasn't independence. It was suffocation dressed up as unity. One friend reportedly told the press, Harry misses being his own man. He thought leaving the royals would give him that. Instead, he feels more managed than ever. That word again, managed. The very thing he despised about palace life had followed him across the ocean. And so, at the charity concert, when Meghan grabbed him at the edge of the stage, Harry snapped. To him, it wasn't just about that night. It was about every moment he'd been denied independence. Every time his words had been cut off, every time his space had been invaded, every time his identity had been reduced to Meghan's husband. Leave me alone. It wasn't just a shout. It was a manifesto, a desperate plea to reclaim the independence he had been chasing since childhood. But here's the tragedy. Independence and marriage don't always mix. Meghan saw togetherness as their strength. Harry saw togetherness as his weakness. They were locked in a tug-of-war with no compromise in sight. And the charity concert was the breaking point. But it wasn't the end. Because backstage, when the cameras were gone, Harry didn't stop at "leave me alone." He reportedly went further, making clear what independence meant to him, and what he would do if he didn't get it. And those words? They shook Meghan to her core. Because for the first time, she realized Harry wasn't just asking for space. He was demanding it. And if he didn't get it, their marriage itself could hang in the balance. Spotlight. For Meghan, it wasn't just a luxury, it was oxygen. The stage, the cameras, the applause, the headlines. These weren't distractions, they were lifelines. Meghan Markle didn't marry into the royal family to fade quietly into the background. She married into it to amplify her presence, to transform herself from actress to global icon. And if Harry thought leaving the firm would dim that spotlight, he underestimated just how fiercely Meghan needed it. Let's trace it back. Before Harry, Meghan was a working actress. Not a superstar, but successful enough. Her role on Suits gave her visibility, but not true fame. She walked red carpets, but rarely as the headliner. She was known in some circles, invisible in others. And for Meghan, invisibility was the ultimate fear. She wanted to be known, heard, seen, and not just in Hollywood, but everywhere. Enter Harry, a prince, a global name, a man whose very existence guaranteed headlines. Meghan had found not just a husband, but a platform. Suddenly, every gesture she made, every outfit she wore, every word she spoke was amplified 100-fold. And Meghan thrived on it. Now here's the contradiction. She told the world she wanted privacy. Remember that? The interviews, the carefully crafted narratives about escaping the intrusive press, about needing space to raise her children. And yet, at the same time, she pursued projects that demanded attention. Blockbuster interviews, Netflix deals, podcasts, magazine spreads. Privacy was the story, but publicity was the reality. And Harry noticed. He wanted simplicity. She wanted spectacle. He craved independence. She craved spotlight. It was a clash written in the stars. Let's look at the charity concert through Meghan's lens. To her, standing at Harry's side wasn't suffocation, it was survival. Every camera shot needed her in it. Every photograph had to reinforce the brand of Harry and Meghan, the unstoppable duo. To step back would risk irrelevance. To let Harry have the stage alone might allow whispers to start. Is Meghan fading? Is she being sidelined? For Meghan, absence equaled weakness. Presence equaled power. And so she clung. She guided. She positioned herself where the lights were brightest. Not because she didn't trust Harry, but because she didn't trust the world to keep her relevant, if she wasn't always in frame. The irony is brutal, isn't it? Meghan claimed independence, but in practice, her need for spotlight made her dependent on it. She wasn't free. She was tethered to the cameras, to the applause, to the validation of strangers. Critics mocked her endlessly. Memes compared her to someone hijacking every scene, photobombing Harry's moments. Commentators accused her of narcissism, of being unable to share the stage even with her own husband. And though much of this mockery was cruel, there was a grain of truth that gnawed at Harry. Meghan couldn't let him stand alone. One insider described it this way: Harry wanted to be seen as Harry. Meghan wanted to be seen with Harry. To her, the two identities were inseparable. But Harry didn't want to be inseparable anymore. He wanted to breathe. Do you see how the tension builds? Meghan's fear of invisibility versus Harry's desperate need for independence. It's like fire and oxygen. When they collide, the blaze is inevitable. And the blaze erupted on stage. Meghan's hand clutched his arm, her instinct to stay glued to him in front of the cameras. Harry, already simmering with frustration, snapped. Leave me alone. It wasn't just about Meghan. It was about everything: the spotlight, the cameras, the years of being defined by others. But Meghan couldn't understand it that way. To her, being at his side was loyalty, was unity, was love. She couldn't see that to him. It felt like theft. And here's where things get darker. After the concert, reports swirled that Meghan tried to spin the moment, reassuring herself and others that Harry was simply overwhelmed or tired. But those who overheard backstage insisted it was more than that. They said Harry made it clear. He was tired of being overshadowed, tired of being clung to, tired of having his moment stolen. And when Meghan pushed back, insisting she was only trying to help, Harry reportedly cut her off with words that left her stunned and silent. Because for the first time, Harry didn't just ask for space. He hinted at consequences if he didn't get it. And those consequences? They weren't about one concert. They were about the future of their marriage. Ambition. It's a powerful thing. When shared, it can build empires, but when divided, it can destroy them. For Harry and Meghan, ambition was never the problem. They both had it in spades. The problem was that their ambitions didn't align. They collided. And when two people with different visions for the future pull in opposite directions, the rope eventually snaps. Harry's ambition was rooted in purpose. From the day he launched the Invictus Games, you could see it. This was a man who wanted to create something lasting, something that honored his military past and gave him a legacy outside the shadow of his royal title. His causes weren't glamorous, but they were real: wounded veterans, mental health, the environment. He wanted to be known not as a prince, but as a man who made a difference. Meghan's ambition, on the other hand, was rooted in visibility. She wanted to be a global brand, a powerhouse, a name that commanded attention on magazine covers, red carpets, and streaming platforms. For her, the causes mattered, but only when they were wrapped in spectacle. The mission was never just the work. It was the image, the impact, the influence. Do you see the problem? Harry wanted to serve. Meghan wanted to shine. And while at first those ambitions looked compatible, they both spoke about compassion, about change, about rewriting the royal rulebook. The cracks widened quickly. When Harry imagined a future, he saw himself at a podium, speaking directly to people, stripped of pomp, raw and authentic. Meghan imagined lights, interviews, documentaries, and a curated spotlight that would cement their place as cultural royalty in Hollywood. And at the charity concert, those clashing ambitions collided in real time. For Harry, that stage was supposed to be about the cause. He wanted the night to highlight veterans, children, families in need. He wanted the cameras to focus on the mission. Meghan saw the stage differently. She saw it as a chance to reinforce their joint image, to make sure no photos circulated without her in the frame, to cement the Sussexes as a united front. When Meghan grabbed Harry's arm that night, she wasn't just being clingy. She was protecting her ambition. She was ensuring that the cameras caught her, that the headlines would read Harry and Meghan rather than just Harry. But to Harry, that grab was the ultimate betrayal of his ambition. He wanted one moment to stand on his own, and she wouldn't let him have it. It's a tragic irony. Harry gave up the palace for Meghan, believing they shared a vision of independence. But what he discovered was that independence meant something very different to her. To him, it was freedom from control. To her, it was freedom to control her own brand. And so, the tension escalated. Friends noticed Harry becoming quieter, less animated, almost withdrawn, while Meghan grew louder, more polished, more determined. He wanted less spotlight. She wanted more. He dreamed of anonymity at times. She feared it like death. Doesn't it make you wonder, was Megxit really Harry's decision at all? Or was it Meghan's ambition dressed up as Harry's rebellion? Critics began to ask the same thing. Commentators suggested that Harry hadn't left the royals because he wanted to, but because Meghan pushed him, promising freedom but delivering another kind of leash. Harry, they said, had simply traded one palace for another, one form of control for another. And the clash only grew sharper. When Netflix courted them, Meghan saw a global platform. Harry saw a burden. When Spotify signed them, Meghan envisioned podcasts that cemented her cultural relevance. Harry dragged his feet, rarely speaking, often sidelined. Even in interviews, Meghan dominated the conversation, while Harry looked increasingly uncomfortable. So when Harry snapped at Meghan during the concert, those 3 words, "Leave me alone," weren't just about that moment. They were the eruption of years of suppressed resentment. A man realizing that his ambition had been overshadowed, that his independence had been hijacked, that his voice had been drowned out in the pursuit of Hollywood deals and red carpet relevance. And what came next? Backstage, Harry reportedly told Meghan in no uncertain terms that their paths were diverging, that his vision for their future no longer matched hers, and that if something didn't change, he wasn't sure how much longer he could go on. Can you feel the weight of that? It wasn't just a marital spat. It was a warning shot, a sign that the rope was fraying, that 2 ambitions pulling in opposite directions were tearing their marriage apart. And Meghan? Insiders say she was stunned. For the first time, she realized Harry wasn't just frustrated. He was serious. His independence wasn't negotiable. His ambition wasn't hers to control. But here's the real question. Could 2 people so deeply ambitious, yet so fundamentally opposed in vision, ever find a way to coexist? Or was the charity concert not just a breaking point, but the beginning of the end? And what Harry did next, his private moves to carve out space away from Meghan, would leave her reeling, and insiders whispering that the Sussex fairy tale was crumbling from within. Behind every polished photograph lies an untold story. Behind every smiling red carpet moment, every hand-in-hand stroll, every charity gala wave, there are the arguments, the silences, the words left unsaid. For Harry and Meghan, the private battles were never really private. They simmered beneath the surface until they began spilling, dripping into the public eye like cracks in a dam. The charity concert outburst may have shocked the audience, but for those who had watched the couple closely, it was simply the culmination of a long pattern. This wasn't the first time Harry had bristled at Meghan's clinginess. It was merely the first time he let the mask slip in front of thousands. Let's start with the subtle signs. Watch old footage carefully, and you'll notice the little tells. Harry pulling his hand back ever so slightly when Meghan reached too tightly. His forced smiles when she interrupted him mid-sentence during interviews. The tightness in his body language when she redirected conversations. To casual observers, these were nothing. To insiders, they were everything. Because those moments didn't end when the cameras stopped. Behind closed doors, staff whispered about rows between the couple, arguments sparked by Meghan's insistence on controlling their image, and Harry's frustration at being managed. He hates being told what to do, one aide reportedly said. And yet, that's exactly how he feels. Constantly told, constantly steered. Imagine that dynamic. A man who left the royal family to escape control, now feeling controlled in his own marriage. A woman who preached independence, now accused of dependency. Do you see the contradiction? It's Shakespearean in its irony. And here's where it gets dangerous. Royals, former or not, live in a fishbowl. Every frown, every awkward glance, every clipped remark is magnified 100 times. What normal couples argue about in kitchens or cars, Harry and Meghan argued about in front of staff, in cars swarmed by paparazzi, in venues packed with donors and guests. There was no safe space. Their private battles were destined to spill into public view. Take the New York car chase incident, for example. Meghan framed it as harrowing, a brush with danger. Critics questioned the narrative. But what insiders noted most was Harry's silence. Meghan spoke passionately. Harry looked weary, subdued. Had he wanted to downplay it? Did he resent the dramatization? Those questions whispered through the press, amplifying the sense that the couple weren't always aligned. Then there were the interviews. Oprah, Netflix, magazine spreads. Meghan commanded the narrative, weaving stories of pain, triumph, and rebirth. Harry sat beside her, nodding, adding fragments here and there. Supportive, yes, but also, at times, overshadowed. And people noticed. Why did Harry, once so outspoken, seem quieter? Was he silenced, or simply exhausted? The charity concert was different because Harry couldn't suppress it anymore. His words weren't polished or rehearsed. They were raw, impulsive, unfiltered. And that authenticity, ironically, made them even more damning. Leave me alone. 3 words that revealed a truth long hidden. Harry wasn't just frustrated. He was suffocating. Now, let's imagine Meghan's perspective. To her, perhaps, these public grabs and interruptions were survival tactics. She'd been vilified in the press, demonized by tabloids, abandoned by her own family. To her, unity wasn't optional, it was armor. Standing beside Harry at all times proved she wasn't alone, that they were stronger together. What she saw as support, Harry saw as smothering. And so the cycle continued. Meghan pushed closer. Harry pulled away. Meghan clung tighter. Harry snapped harder. And the more this dynamic played out in public, the more the world saw through the cracks. The memes didn't help. Harry looks like a hostage. Meghan won't let him breathe. Online mockery turned their dynamic into a spectacle, humiliating Harry and fueling his resentment. Because for him, every joke wasn't just about Meghan. It was about his masculinity, his independence, his image. And no man wants to be the punchline in his own marriage. Staffers recalled one particularly awkward moment after an event when Harry told Meghan, "I need space," only for her to reply, "We don't have space. We are the brand." The silence that followed, they said, was suffocating. And that's the core of it, isn't it? Harry wanted to be a man. Meghan wanted to be a brand. Their marriage wasn't just about love. It was about competing visions of identity. And those visions clashed not in private bedrooms, but in glaring public arenas. The charity concert was simply the loudest eruption. But it wasn't the last. Because backstage, what Harry reportedly said after his outburst wasn't just frustration, it was ultimatum. Words that would shake Meghan to her core and leave staff whispering. Had the endgame finally begun? The concert hall had been buzzing with excitement. Music filled the air, donors mingled, and organizers smiled, relieved that weeks of planning had finally paid off. But in an instant, all of that was overshadowed. One sharp outburst, "Leave me alone," and the mood in the room shifted like a cold wind sweeping through open doors. The people running the show weren't just embarrassed, they were stunned. Charity organizers live and die by reputation. Their events depend on smoothness, on maintaining an atmosphere of dignity and respect. They invite royals and celebrities not only to raise funds, but to lend prestige. And here, instead of prestige, they got scandal. Several witnesses later confided, carefully and off the record, that the moment Harry snapped was like a punch to the gut for the staff. One organizer recalled freezing in her seat, praying the crowd would mistake it for a playful quip. Another admitted he buried his face in his notes, pretending not to notice. But everyone noticed. The silence after Harry's words was proof. Think about what that means. A charity, meant to spotlight causes and raise awareness, suddenly became a stage for marital drama. Instead of headlines about the children or veterans being honored that night, the newspapers buzzed about Harry yelling at Meghan. For organizers, it was a nightmare, their hard work eclipsed by gossip. One insider put it bluntly, "It felt like we'd been hijacked. We wanted to focus on the cause. Instead, all anyone could talk about was their marriage." Behind the scenes, staff scrambled to contain the damage. PR advisors whispered about how to spin it. Should they frame it as stress? As a misunderstanding? Should Harry apologize? Should Meghan smile extra wide in photos to downplay the tension? Every option was debated, and none felt sufficient. Because the truth was too raw to ignore. Everyone had heard the words. Now here's the part that stings. Organizers said they saw this coming. Not the outburst itself, but the tension. They'd noticed Meghan hovering over Harry all evening, adjusting his jacket, tugging at his sleeve, whispering in his ear before he took the stage. She wouldn't give him space, one organizer confided. He looked annoyed. You could tell something was brewing. And when it finally boiled over, the organizers weren't surprised. They were just horrified that it happened on their watch. Publicly, of course, they said nothing. Charity professionals know better than to criticize high-profile patrons. But privately, the whispers spread fast. Did you see the way he snapped? Did you see her face afterward? Do you think they'll even last? Conversations that should have been about donations were instead about the Sussexes' marriage. The humiliation factor was heavy. Royals are supposed to embody composure. Even Harry, who had left the firm, carried that expectation. When a prince loses control in public, it reflects not only on him, but on the institution he once represented. The organizers felt the sting of that association. Their event, meant to be uplifting, was now branded with scandal. And the guests noticed too. Some looked away, pretending it hadn't happened. Others exchanged awkward glances. A few even whispered, captured by eagle-eyed attendees with phones. He's had enough of her. The kind of comments that spread like wildfire online within hours. This is where perception becomes reality. Harry might have meant it as a fleeting burst of frustration. Meghan might have dismissed it as stress. But to organizers, donors, and the public, it became evidence. Evidence of a marriage under strain. Evidence of cracks too wide to hide. And the irony? Instead of uniting the couple's image, the concert fractured it. Meghan was painted as needy, Harry as resentful, and the cause they came to support was drowned out by scandal. But it didn't end there. Because after the curtains closed and the guests left, whispers from backstage began to leak. Staff members claimed Harry's fury didn't stop at the stage. It intensified behind closed doors. What he said there, in the heat of the moment, was even more shocking than what the world had already seen. And when those words reached the ears of the charity team, they realized they hadn't just witnessed a marital spat. They'd witnessed the unraveling of a brand they had depended on. Because what Harry said backstage wasn't just anger. It was revelation. The curtain had barely fallen when the real show began, not on stage, but online. Within minutes of Harry's outburst, shaky phone footage and hurried tweets started popping up. A whisper in the concert hall became a roar on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Did Prince Harry just yell at Meghan? Did he say what I think he said? The internet thrives on drama, and this was pure oxygen. Clips were slowed down, analyzed frame by frame. Amateur lip readers confirmed what ears had already heard. Leave me alone. The words spread like wildfire. Hashtags trended globally. Hashtag Harry snaps. Hashtag let Harry breathe. Hashtag Meghan clingy. In hours, the narrative had escaped the concert hall and entered the global consciousness. And the reactions? Brutal. Memes flooded timelines. One showed Meghan grabbing Harry with the caption, "When you can't let him have a boys' night out." Another plastered Harry's angry face over a famous movie still, Get Out. TikTokers reenacted the moment, parodying Meghan as the overbearing partner and Harry as the trapped prince. It was funny, yes, but also humiliating. Because humor has a sharp edge, and Harry knew it cut deep. But let's not pretend everyone laughed. Sympathy poured in too. Thousands of comments painted Harry as the victim of a controlling relationship. "Poor guy can't breathe," one user wrote. "You can see the misery in his eyes," another added. Strangers thousands of miles away suddenly felt protective of Harry, seeing him not as a privileged royal, but as a man suffocating under the weight of someone else's neediness. Meghan, meanwhile, took the brunt of the backlash. Words like clingy, needy, narcissistic trended alongside her name. Old clips resurfaced, her cutting Harry off during interviews, her grabbing his hand on red carpets. People began stitching the charity concert outburst with those older moments, creating a highlight reel of control. The narrative hardened. Meghan won't let Harry shine. And this is where perception becomes lethal. In the world of celebrity, image is everything. Meghan had carefully crafted hers as the supportive wife, the strong, independent woman who sacrificed a palace for love. But the internet doesn't care about carefully crafted images. It cares about viral clips. And that clip, Harry snapping, "Leave me alone," was kryptonite to her narrative. Harry wasn't spared either. Some mocked him for weakness. "He's just realizing what we all saw years ago," one tweet sneered. "Imagine being a prince and still not in charge of your own life," another jabbed. The internet turned him into both victim and fool, a man pitted and mocked in equal measure. Think about how that must have felt. Harry, already resentful of being the punchline, now watched as millions laughed at his marriage. Meghan, who thrived on spotlight, now found the light exposing her worst angles. What was supposed to be a night of charity became a public referendum on their relationship. Even mainstream media couldn't resist. Headlines screamed, "Harry snaps at Meghan in public. Charity concert turns awkward after royal outburst." Tabloids feasted on every detail, while commentators debated whether this was the first crack in the Sussex armor or proof the marriage was doomed. And here's the cruel twist. The very platforms Meghan relied on to stay relevant now turned against her. Social media, once her stage, became her battlefield. She couldn't control the narrative. Not this time. Meanwhile, Harry's outburst took on a life of its own. Psychologists weighed in, dissecting his tone and body language. Relationship experts debated whether this was a healthy boundary or a sign of collapse. The world wasn't just watching, it was diagnosing. And behind the noise, one fact remained. Their private battles were no longer private. They were public property. And once the public takes ownership of your marriage, the damage is almost impossible to undo. But the most explosive revelations weren't online. They were whispered backstage, behind the velvet curtains, where staff overheard the continuation of Harry's fury. The internet saw the crack. The insiders heard the collapse. And when those leaked, the backlash online would look like child's play compared to the firestorm that followed. The audience filed out. The applause faded. The music dissolved into silence. But behind the curtain, the real drama began. Harry stormed off stage, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. Meghan followed close behind, her heels clicking against the polished floor, her hand reaching once again for his arm. This time, he pulled away hard. Staff members nearby froze, unsure whether to move, to intervene, or to pretend they hadn't seen anything at all. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Meghan hissed, her voice low but sharp. Harry turned, his face red with fury. "Do you have any idea what you do to me every time you grab me like that?" Every single time. The words cut through the backstage air like glass shattering. For once, Harry wasn't masking, wasn't performing, wasn't controlling himself. He was raw, real. Insiders who overheard described the moment as electric, painful, unforgettable. It was like watching years of pent-up resentment finally break free, one whispered. Meghan tried to smooth it over, insisting she was only supporting him, only standing by him. "I'm your wife. That's what I'm supposed to do," she snapped back. But Harry wasn't having it. "No, you're supposed to let me breathe," he shot back, his voice rising. "For once, can you let me stand on my own without pulling me into your performance?" Silence. The kind of silence that makes hearts race. Staffers shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact, pretending to fuss with equipment. But every ear was tuned in. They all heard it. And then came the words that stunned even Meghan. Words that, according to leaks later shared with the press, revealed the depth of Harry's frustration. "I didn't leave one prison just to end up in another." The sentence hung in the air, heavy, damning. Think about the implication. Harry had left the royal family because he felt controlled, suffocated, voiceless. And now, in the heat of anger, he admitted what many had suspected, that he felt the same way in his marriage. Different palace, different captor, same chains. Meghan's face reportedly went pale. For someone who had built their entire narrative around unity, those words were devastating. To hear her husband compare life with her to a prison, it wasn't just an argument. It was a revelation. And staffers knew it. They exchanged nervous glances, silently agreeing never to repeat what they'd heard. But secrets like that don't stay buried forever. One way or another, the truth leaks out. Insiders later whispered about Meghan's reaction. She tried to regain control, reminding Harry of their brand, their image, their children. "We're in this together," she insisted. But Harry, still seething, replied, "Together doesn't mean chained at the wrist." Have you ever heard a couple fight like that in public? The discomfort, the awkwardness, the second-hand embarrassment? Now imagine that fight involving one of the world's most famous couples, in front of staff and organizers who had just witnessed a scandal on stage. The humiliation was complete. And yet, what's most chilling is not the words themselves, but the tone. Staffers said Harry's voice cracked with desperation, as though he wasn't just angry, but exhausted. As though he had carried this weight for far too long, and the dam had finally burst. The backstage confrontation lasted minutes, but to those who saw it, it felt like hours. And when it ended, Harry stormed out alone, leaving Meghan standing in the corridor, shaken, humiliated, and furious. By the next morning, whispers of what was said backstage had already begun circulating. Not everything, not every word, but enough. Enough to suggest that the marriage everyone thought unbreakable was on the brink. And if the concert was the crack in the armor, the backstage confrontation was the shattering blow. But it didn't end there. Because the fallout from that night, the leaks, the rumors, the media frenzy, would thrust their marriage into an even harsher spotlight than before. And the world would soon ask the question no one thought possible.